to Section 17 and PC Motion 17. Mr. Harris.
I move that subsection 7, bracket 1 of the bill, which amends Section 9 of the Vital Statistics Act, be amended by adding the following subsection. Choice of mother, father, or parent. Bracket 1.1 and bracket, a parent of a child may elect to be indicated in the registration of birth as mother, as father, or as parent by stating their election in the certification.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Did you wish to speak to that?
Yes, I recommend, obviously, that you all support this amendment. We understand and support the need to ensure that all couples with children who use surrogates or other non-traditional means of reproduction are recognized as the parents of those children by law. And to be clear, there is no issue with adapting our laws to ensure that non-traditional parents are being recognized as just that, parents, in all that the term entails. What this motion speaks to is the need to ensure that in the process of legislating all parents to be recognized as such, Bill 28 also ensures we retain the right to use the terms mother and father on forms or in laws like the Vital Statistics Act or the Change of Name Act. Now, while we've heard assurances indicating that Bill 28 has no intention to remove terms like mother and father, by supporting today's motion, we make it clear today and for the future that as Bill 28 aims to strengthen and be inclusive of all kinds of families, we are taking the step to further ensure that inclusivity by legislatively allowing for the option of registering as mother, as father, or as parent, depending on what the respective parent elects. And we put it right here in the bill itself. Of course, I have to mention recently in the Waterloo Record, Louisa D'Amato wrote on this subject, removing the mother and father option from a school form and forcing everyone to say parent instead, if that were to occur down the road, would, as she puts it, erase a description of the most powerful relationships we experience. Chair, as a proud father of my children, Murphy and Rosie and Lincoln, let's ensure we are providing the equality that Bill 28 speaks to, both today and for future generations, and guarantee that parents will have the option to be identified by government how they themselves choose in supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. I have Ms. DeNovo, and then I have Mr. Broadnetti. Ms. DeNovo, you first.
I'm going to vote against this, but that's, I just wanted to point out to Hansard, I think you said, Mr. Harris, section 7 and not 17. Yeah, 7, subsection 17, but I think you said 7. So I think he's going to need to reread that just for Hansard.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Broadnetti.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to say this proposed amendment makes it clear that Patrick Brown and the PC Party are choosing to align themselves with right-wing socially conservative groups that do not want LGBTQ2+ families and families who use assisted reproduction to be treated equally. The amendment Patrick Brown and the PC Party are proposing reflects the views of Charles McVety, who presented at this committee 2 weeks ago. I think it's important to remind this committee that Patrick Brown and the PCs are aligning themselves with an individual who represents a group that opposes a woman's right to choose gay marriage and an up-to-date sex ed and health curriculum for our kids. It's clear from this amendment that Patrick Brown continues to hold on to his right-wing, socially conservative beliefs that helped him become leader of the PC Party. I'm going to remind the PC members who are here today that Ontario is a province that values diversity and equality. Despite the fear-mongering and misinformation being spread by Mr. McVety and the right-wing social conservative groups, if passed, this bill will continue to allow parents to identify as mother and father at home or on their child's birth certificate. Our government is not getting rid of mom or dad in this bill or otherwise. To suggest otherwise is false. The Vital Statistics Act already allows a parent or parents to choose the title that best reflects who they identify with: mother, father, parent. It's already there. The PC Party should know that these forms and with those titles are available today at the Service Ontario's website.
Thank you. I have Mr. Fraser, and then I have Mr. Hillier. Mr. Fraser.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And And I just, to my colleague across the way, you said just to make something clear. I don't think it was ever unclear, other than there were people trying to make it unclear, that this was about taking somebody's rights away as opposed to recognizing people's identities. At the core of this bill, it is about children, the right to know their parentage, and the right for two loving parents who have a genuine interest in that child to have a relationship that's recognized, okay, by the government, and to uncomplicate things. Right now, it's terribly complicated for a lot of families. That's what this bill is about. And there's been a characterization of this bill in the media, online, all over, which is a total mischaracterization. We know that as of this day, by regulation, on those forms, people can identify as a mother or a father or as a parent. But let me finish. But what's most important is no one's taking anything away from anybody. No, I think you're being a bit petulant. What I'm trying to say is, I don't think that it was ever unclear. So I have a hard time supporting this motion because the premise for it is based on a lot of misinformation and actually something that I believe is very destructive and very disruptive to families in this province. So I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Chair. It's disappointing to see such a level of partisanship get displayed by the member from Ottawa South and the parliamentary secretary. Especially the parliamentary secretary's comments about Patrick Brown and the right wing. And I'd like to, just for the committee's understanding, the bill as it stands at the present time, and I think the member from Ottawa South may want to listen to this, the bill as it stands at the present time, maybe I'll take a step back. We know all government forms, in all legislation, the minister or the bureaucracy is already empowered and enabled through legislation to draft and create forms as required, okay? So if there was to be any changes on a form, the ministry does not have to come back to the legislature to seek approval. The ministry already has that authority vested in it to alter the forms however they determine appropriate, as long as it's consistent with the legislation. So, as we heard through all the deputations, this bill is about inclusion, right? Everybody who came and made representations here wanted to ensure that people are recognized as parents, using various reproductive technologies, various arrangements, that this bill, and it's necessary, this bill is necessary to put our laws in step with the changes in society that we've agreed to make over the last number of decades. So this amendment, because it's included in the legislation, would ensure that if there was any alteration to the forms down the road, that the alteration would still put an obligation that the terms father or mother or parent are on the form. Okay? That's, it's very, very consistent with all the discussion that we had. This is not something raised by Charles McVety, and as much as I dislike the attack that some members in this committee went after some of those deputants, such as Mr. McVety, I think it is important that we hear from people and that we include legitimate and without attacking people, without attacking. So, you know, I just want to make sure that every member of this committee is aware. This is consistent with what we heard from all deputants, not just one, right, or two. It was consistent across the whole spectrum of deputants. Nobody wanted to take away or prevent somebody identifying as a mother or a father or a parent. So this just ensures that down the road, maybe a year from now, or maybe 10 years from now, or whatever period of time, if the forms need updating, need reconfiguration because of technology or anything else, that they will continue to include the terms mother and father along with parent.
Thank you, Mr. Hillier. Ms. DeNovo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to assure my colleagues to the right, as the author of Cy and Ruby's law upon which this bill is based, that certainly, and to assure Mr. McVitie too and his followers, I want to say that certainly, Mr. Hillier, you're incorrect. We did not hear from across all those who testified that they wanted to see mother and father. In fact, and there were just a couple who came forward and asked for that out of all of those who came to testify. But most people who came to testify were concerned about was parent equality, which is what the bill is titled, and to make that equality real. It's not to make that equality real just by changing forms. If it were, we would not be discussing a bill here today. Parents would not have worked all those hours to make it so. And it certainly wasn't upon Mr. McVitie's invitation that we looked at amendments either. I just wanted to correct the article in the Sun today. Mr. McVitie had nothing to do with the amendments that we put forward. Of course, he had something to do with this amendment. But again, it is not representative of the vast majority of those we heard. Also, just a friendly sort of amendment to what Mr. Fraser said. It's up to 4 parents, not just 2. And that's also a change that this bill makes. With this bill, it's not as perfect as we in the NDP would have liked to have seen it, but with this bill, what will happen for the first time in Ontario is that we'll catch up to other provinces. For the first time in Ontario, LGBTQ2S parents will become equal. That's what this bill is about. And more importantly, perhaps, their children will be equal with other children. And there's absolutely no truth to the, to your assertion that you cannot call yourself mother and father anymore. Of course you can. Hey, depends how you use the, term mother, but you can call yourself mother and father, whoever you are, whatever gender you are, you can use those terms. And I think that's important as well. So just to clarify, there was never, ever any intention, either on the government's part or on the New Democratic Party's part, to take away the ability of parents to call themselves mother and father, and this bill does not do that, categorically so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Noble. Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Chair. It's unfortunate that a member from the third party is conflating issues. Not once did I suggest that people were not permitted to call themselves mother or father. That's not up for discussion.
Mr. Hillier has the floor.
It's not up for discussion. We know individuals can refer to themselves however they may choose to. What we're talking about is legislation. And what does this bill do, or what does it not do? Further to the member of the third party, I was here through all the deputations. Everybody that I heard here referred that they wanted to add into the legislation. They wanted this legislation to broaden its scope, right? Nobody talked about limiting the scope. And as it was discussed, we wanted to ensure, as I stated earlier, that people using assisted reproductive technologies and different lifestyle arrangements, different, arrangements that our legislation would accommodate those various and different arrangements. And I think it's done a good job in doing so, right? I think it's done a good job. However, as I stated earlier, we know that forms and the vast machinery of government is done not within the Legislative Assembly, but outside of our purview. It's done through the administration at the ministry level through regulations, okay? When they do things through regulation, those items do not come back to the House for scrutiny or examination or for blessing or consent, okay? So the only time a regulation comes back to the House for our examination, if it is at the request of the Regulations and Private Bills Committee, who find something out of order with a regulation. So because this bill is absent in its identifying the various terms, it would, without this amendment, it would allow those forms to be altered, right? And let's bear in mind, this amendment is very specific. It's Section 9 of the Vital Statistics Act, okay? And it provides, in the very last line, by stating their election in the certification. So a parent may elect to choose to tick the box mother, may choose to tick the box father, may choose to tick the box parent. I think it is absolutely consistent with what we heard during the committee. It's also very and absolutely consistent with the technical briefing provided to me by the ministry on this bill. They said there's nothing in this bill that would remove or eliminate the terms mother or father, and they're absolutely correct. Right. There's nothing in this bill that would do that. That could only or could be done by way of regulation outside of our. So, listen, John. You know, the member from Ottawa South. This is not the Grin and Bear It show. This is not puzzlement time. These are legitimate concerns. They're real concerns by a lot of people. Okay, we do have an obligation to make our laws that are consistent with the expectations of society. Okay, not one individual or not two individuals, but the broad spectrum of society, and it must also incorporate protection for minorities, and it must. That's what the rule of law is all about. So, to earlier, the member, I believe it was a member from Ottawa South, it may have been the parliamentary assistant, said we're not getting rid of these terms, in the legislation, and I just agreed. You're not. All this amendment does is ensures that they won't be gotten rid of by regulation down the road. If the government wanted to change those forms and delete the terms mother or father on a form, then the bill would have to come back for scrutiny by the legislator. I think it's very fair and reasonable, and there's no evil lurking here in the backgrounds, John. This is a pretty straight up, and anybody who understands the administrative and legislative process understands that what I'm saying is factual, and it's just a safeguard.
Thank you, Mr. Hillier. I have Mr. Fraser and then Ms. DeNovo.
Very much, Mr. Hillier. And I don't think that my remarks to you were in any way partisan. I was just simply stating the fact. I'll just simply stating the fact that then there's been a perception created among a great amount of people that's caused a lot of consternation. And this amendment that you're putting forward was based on that. Is based on that, and I believe, and I can't support it for that reason. And what I did want to say is, and I'll repeat it again, that this bill does not eliminate anybody's rights. It recognizes people's identities and actually uncomplicates things for a great number of people. And I respect the legislative process. I think I do understand it and understand what you're saying. And I guess what I'm saying to you is, I don't agree with you. That's the simple. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, and I now have Ms. DeNovo.
Yeah, just very quickly, a point I wanted to make about the term parent versus the gendered terms of mother and father, which are gendered. One of the things that we've looked at in this bill is trying to make this legislation trans-inclusive in light of the Ontario Human Rights Code, which was an all-party agreed upon bill as well, Toby's Act, to add gender identity and gender expression to that. So, so again, and I understand you're after the vital statistics, but here's the thing. What you're proposing here is an actual amendment to the law, not to a regulation. And as you're quite right, only the government controls that regulation. So, so let it be parent. It's a legal term, and it's non-gendered. So instead of fighting for the right of folk to be called mother or father, perhaps we should also be fighting for the right of people to be called neither mother nor father. And I think that's equally important. So just want to put that on the record, and hopefully we can get on and pass this bill so this all happens.
Thank you. I have Mr. McMeekin, and then I have Mr. Hillier. Mr. McMeekin.
I'll call the question.
I've been advised that as long as we have debate and people are not being repetitive, that we will continue to hear debate.
That point, Mr. Chairman, but
Well,
that's your...
I appreciate your sentiment, Mr. McMeekin. I'll go to Mr. Hillier, and hopefully we will be able to move forward.
Thank you, Chair. I find it disappointing that while there is thoughtful deliberations going on, that the member from the government side would want to stifle those deliberations. But going back to the member from Ottawa South, it appears that he is going to vote against this amendment due to a perception of our motivation. I think I was very clear about the motivation. Well, that's exactly what you said, John. That it was due to our motivation that you are opposed to this bill. I'd like to know if you thought my motives were pure and sincere, would you then alter your determination in your decision and then and be supportive of this amendment if you thought more highly of my motivations? But I can say to you, all members of this committee, I understand the legislative process, and I have no doubt that the member for Ottawa South does as well. He's been in the business for a while, long before he got here. I would ask him to identify to the committee where I was factually in error or inconsistent in my my summary of how the regulatory process works. If I am in error, if I'm factually incorrect, please let me know where. I'm on pretty solid grounds that the regulations the ministry is already empowered to make forms, and there's no mention in this bill about the ministry making forms. That's because that's already enabled. And I do want to say, and I want to make sure the record is clear. When I said about the partisan attack, I was not referring to the member from Ottawa South, but the parliamentary assistant got his talking points very clearly, and in every 10th word that came out of his mouth in opposition to our amendment was the term Patrick Brown. Patrick Brown is not sitting at this table. The member from Lanark and the member from Kitchener are, and we're advancing this amendment on behalf of the PC caucus, but also because it is reasonable and responsible in our view, and with sincerity, we find this reasonable. I find the position that both the third party and the government is taken with respect to this amendment to be unreasonable. I think it is not inclusive, the position that you're taking. It's preventing, or possibly preventing, let me massage that word well. The bill does not prevent, okay? But nor does it safeguard. This is a safeguard. We're putting in a safeguard, and I think safeguards are not unreasonable.
Thank you, Mr. Hillier. And with that, I'm assuming that everyone has made the arguments that they want to make. We can proceed to the vote. It's a recorded vote, as we've discussed before. All those in favor of the amendment, please indicate.
Mr. Hillier, Mr. Harris,
Those opposed?
Mr. Anderson, Mr. Berardinetti, Mr. Fraser, Ms. Koala, Mr. McMeekin, Ms. Donoval.
Abstentions? The motion is lost. We now go to the motion on Section 17 as a whole. I'm assuming there's no discussion on Section 17 as a whole. Shall Section 17 as amended carry? No. No. Apologies. Shall Section 17 carry? All those in favor, please indicate.
Mr. Anderson, Mr. Berardinetti, Mr. Fraser, Ms. Koala, Mr. McMeekin, Ms. Donoval.
Opposed? Abstentions? Section 17 is carried. Members of the committee, with your permission, I'd like to bundle Sections 18 to 23. There are no amendments there. That being Sections 18 to 23. The next amendment is in Section 24.